Top 15 Worst Serial Killers in History. In this video, we'll be going back nearly 20 years, examining the top 15 worst serial killers in history as opposed to placing them based on how many victims. We'll examine the horrifying and heinous methods they executed their killings and the flagrant disrespect we have for human life. I hope you're prepared. Number 15. Burdella Roberto. Often referred to as the Kansas City Butcher, was a serial killer from America who was active in Kansas City over the 1980s. Burdella was a notoriously cruel criminal to have claimed the lives of 6 or more people. Between 1984 and 1987, men used vicious ways of torture that he frequently used on children, men of Caucasian descent who were either employees or friends of his. After he would drug them when he had them in his home, using sedatives made of alcohol or animals' sedatives, and confine them to a bed with piano wire in his basement. The 14th is Delphine LaLaurie. American Madame Delphine LaLaurie, socialite who was born in New Orleans to a family of Irish descent. She with Leonard Lewis, a physician. Nicholas Laurie, in 1825 and 1832, respectively, had a two-story home constructed in 1140. She resided on Royal Street with her spouse, father of 2 daughters, and slave. But between 1831 and 1834, individuals. Laurie was abused and tortured while in slavery, with a minimum of 12 enslaved individuals perished while under her care. The crimes light when a fire broke out in April 1834 outside the LaLaurie home, exposing the horrifying torture and mutilation. Onlookers discovered 7 slaves disfigured and left hanging in the quarters. LaLaurie was cruel and possessive. Number 13. Fritz Honka. German Friedrich Paul Fritz Honka, a prolific criminal who worked in the red light district of Hamburg. During the early 1970s, he was in charge of the demise of 4 or more women who were prostitute in Honka worked night shifts. Shell's watchman and his transgressions happened in the years 1970 to 1975. The way that Honka operated was by strangling. His victims are dismembered, then concealed in. He did this with his attic or flat. Each of his 3 victims, whose no reports of disappearances were made to the police after more renters made a complaint. Foul odors coming from Honka's apartment. Observed preserved remnants amid the police were contacted, and ashes were found. Honka was convicted on a single count of 3 charges of manslaughter and murder, and received a 15-year sentence. Amelia Dyer at number 12. It is believed that Amelia Dyer is among the most infamous killers in British. Traditionally, she worked as a young farmer. Throughout the Victorian era, a custom that was common at the period, infant farmers would charge a fee to adopt unwanted children, ensuring that the kids will be well maintained, while in actuality many were cruel to Dyer and even killed him. With experience as a nurse and the midwife informed the clients that kids would be provided with a secure and a devoted house. But this couldn't have been much more. In reality, Dyer permitted kids to perish from malnourishment and famine. She finally even switched to a quicker techniques for killing people for personal gain of raising her earnings, but not until the body of a baby was discovered in the Thames is linked to one of Dyer's several replaces, although specialists think that she might have killed 200 to 400 kids. Number 11. Randy Crafts. The scorecard, often referred to as Randy Kraft. The killer was a sexual offender and a serial killer, predator that preyed mostly on children, teenage boys and Caucasian guys in their places. From his late teens to his mid-20s, he frequently abused them. His victims were hitchhikers from gay bars or escapees. Kraft committed his crimes in California throughout the 1970s and 1980s, as well as his among the several bodies discovered were victims. Number 10. Edmund Kemper. Edmund Kemper was a serial criminal from America who killed 10 individuals, including his mother and grandparents at age 15. Kemper killed his grandparents, both of them, due to his curiosity about how it felt, as though he was freed at age 21, and started removing female hitchhikers from their vehicles, armed with the means to carry out his heinous wants. That at first he let these women leave, but he started killing them right away. His first, Marianne Pesce and Anita, were the victims. Two Fresno State students are Lakshis. After that, Kemper had sex with them. Murdering them, he carried on with the attack, aimed against 4 other ladies, and disposed of pieces in different places, gaining the moniker Co-ed Butcher for him. Kemper murdered his mother in April 1973. Ted Bundy at number 9. Serial killer Ted Bundy was an American scoundrel who carried out horrific acts. In Ted's final defense team member in the 1970s, lawyer Polly Nelson referred to him as the epitome of callous wickedness. He abducted, molested, and removed the numerous young women's and girls' lives, and at last admitted to 30 killings, perpetrated between 1974 and 7 states, as well as 1978. Yet the precise count of his victims, possibly much higher. Bundy had a charming disposition and was physically appealing, which he put to use for his advantage to win the confidence of victims. Number 8. Andrei Chikatilo. Andrei Chikatilo, aka the Rostov's Butcher, was an infamous serial criminal from the previous Soviet Union. Between 1978 and 1990, he terrified the nation by committing sexual assault, disfiguring and killing at least 50 ladies and kids. He was found guilty on 52 charges of murder and given the death penalty. Chikatilo's typical approach was to vulnerable youths who are homeless and runaways. Kids, he deceived them into pursuing him to a remote location, after which take there by stabbing or strangling people. Then he would continue to act violently, cut apart their bodies. Remarkably, Chikatilo later disclosed that was his sole chance of success. He got his sexual gratification by murdering. Additionally, targeted adult female employees as Chikatilo prostitutes in the final detailed confession to 34 murders. Number 7. Roy Norris and Bittaker. Additionally, Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, referred to as the 2 toolbox killers, American serial killers as well as sexual abusers, those who abducted the children as predators. Sexual abuse, torture, and responsible death of 5 adolescent girls in the South. In 1979, California spanned 5 months. They took on the moniker toolbox killers because the majority of instruments utilized in their objects from Crime Square that are usually kept within a domestic toolset like sledgehammers, ice picks, and pliers. Richard Cottingham at number 6. In New York, Richard Cottingham was employed, and from 1967 to 1980 New Jersey, he was dubbed the Torso Killer for his gruesome habit of dismembering his victims and leaving only their torsos behind. One of his most heinous crimes involved dismembering 2 prostitutes in a motel room, taking their hands and heads with him, and setting the room on fire. Cottingham was eventually caught in 1981. After being seen fleeing from an attempted murder. Although he was convicted of only 6 murders, Cottingham claims to have committed between 85 and 100 murders. Number 5. Dennis Nilsen. Dennis Nilsen was a Scottish serial criminal and necrophile who took the lives of at least 12 young men and boys in London between 1978 and 1983. He was found guilty of 6 counts of murder and 2 of attempted murder, and was sentenced to life imprisonment on November 4, 1983. Number 4. Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee the Monster, was an American serial criminal and sex offender who murdered and dismembered 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. Dahmer's crimes were horrific, involving necrophilia, cannibalism, and the permanent preservation of body parts. Most of his victims were murdered by strangulation after being drugged with sedatives. In some cases, Dahmer also attempted to induce a submissive state in his victims by injecting hydrochloric acid or boiling water into their frontal lobes. Number 3. David Parker Ray. David Ray, also known as the Toy Box. The killer was a notorious criminal who kidnapped, tortured, and sexually assaulted women for years. Although he was never convicted of murder, he was accused by his accomplices of taking the lives of several women, and it's believed he may have murdered as many as 60 women. He created a mobile torture chamber, a semi-trailer which he named his Toy Box, that was soundproofed and equipped with instruments for sexual torture. He kidnapped women of low socioeconomic status and held them captive for several weeks to months, subjecting them to horrific sexual abuse, often with a range of tools including whips, chains, pulleys, straps, clamps, leg spreader bars, surgical blades, and saws. Ray even built his own electrical generator, which was used to shock his victims. Number 2. Luis Garavito. Luis Garavito, also known as the Beast or Goofy, is a Colombian serial criminal, sex offender, pedophile, and necrophile who confessed to sexually assaulting, torturing, mutilating, and murdering between 100 to 400 minors, mainly young boys, in the western Colombian region in October 1999. He began his heinous crimes in the autumn of 1980 by tormenting and sexually assaulting minors aged between 6 and 16. It is estimated that he had raped and tortured at least 200 minors. He received a sentence of in total 1853 years and 9 days in prison. Number 1. Albert Fish. The name Albert Fish still makes me smile. Chills down the backs of individuals who recognize his tale. Born in Washington, D.C., in Fish from 1870 had a childhood marred by abuse and tragedy. When he was 5 years old, his mother was killed, and his father was compelled to abandon him in a foster home. These fish were physically mistreated things he came to appreciate as he grew. The unsettling habits of older fish only got worse, turning him into a prostitute, and began preying on young people in New York City. Fish was convicted and given a sentence that electrocutions to death as a penalty he voluntarily taken on. After Fish's death, his attorney claimed to have definitive. Fish's remarks have no meaning whatsoever more than pen and paper notes. The attorney declined to read them, saying that I would always keep it private. It was the greatest vile series of swear words. If you've watched this far, please share your thoughts in the comments box below for more fascinating subjects. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos.